This plan is illogical, missing evidence, and disproportionate. Rushing through such a major proposal with such limited time for due diligence has far-reaching consequences. The Loddon Valley Garden Village SDL and the Barkham Square extension of the Arborfield Green SDL realise these consequences through their direct threat of forever changing the character and way of life that attracts people to make Barkham and Arborfield their home. These proposals don't just break the promises made to residents by the administration, they are the personification of disproportionate and unsustainable development in Wokingham. Barkham and Arborfield and its surroundings do not have the road infrastructure to accommodate a development of the scale that Hall Farm proposes. Its considerable distance from any train station or even any major settlement shows that the LPU's claims that Hall Farm can accommodate not just sustainable, but any methods of transport are vastly overstated. At Barkham Square, Barkham Road already cannot keep up with demand. 600 more houses will only deepen this problem. And for education, the Bohunt sixth form provision will be largely swallowed up by existing demand in Arborfield Green. With no further provisions for Barkham Square, this will only deepen secondary school capacity issues, and any justification for such a limited provision is absent from this plan. Healthcare and retail services are already of high demand, but limited supply too. Arborfield Green's community hub raises concerns for service provision at Hall Farm as well. As a consequence of numerous Section 106 agreement violations that the council have effectively ignored, it's put residents like myself in a position where I have to go to Finchampstead for the doctor, Yateley for the supermarket, Wokingham for a meal, and Winnish for work. There is a clear trend of travel outside the ward in order to access essential services. As the past has shown, we cannot rely on enforcement. If Hall Farm was left with inadequate service provision for the better part of a decade, the strain on local infrastructure and services in surrounding communities will be too great to bear. A straw would break the camel's back, but Barkham Square and Hall Farm are more like lead weights. The conflicting arguments for why and why not certain proposals are acceptable are also a cause for concern. Ashridge and the land east of Twyford were rejected as a reasonable growth scenario on the basis that they were too close to each other. But the LVGV SDL and the Barkham Square extension of the Arborfield Green SDL are far closer in distance. Hall Farm promotes development in flood zone 2 and 3 areas. The ward will experience a significant loss of both B&V agricultural land and biodiversity. Strategic gaps would be drastically reduced and Langley Commons identity would cease to exist. These arguments were used to justify the exclusion of other sites, but the extent to which said arguments were equitably weighted is far from just. We can all see that this plan, in its current form, will ultimately do far more harm than good. It needs a rethink. So if you're keen to support common sense, equitable distribution, accessible services, and a sustainable vision for our entire borough, I plead, no matter whether you sit here, there, or there, support this amendment tonight, not just to save Barkham and Arborfield, but to save Wokingham from unsustainable development.